Okay, boys, let's see what the off-stream Baeclast around the Legion with Jonathan is gonna be. This is pretty book. Do. Okay, boys. I'm excited.
Hey guys, Tucket here, and Jonathan has prepared something very special. Now,
How's the audio? Is it do I need to up it? Is it, is it fine? Like if I talk
none of us
while Tarky is talking, do you hear me or Tarky or both?
Stuff. So if anything goes wrong, then it's completely fine, and don't worry. But yeah, Jonathan, thank you very much for coming on. What have you got to show us today?
All right, so I mean, basically what I want to do here is have a bit of a fireside chat, if you will, about...
And you hear them clearly, that's important.
It's kind of one of those things where, like, like for quite a long time, I would say, like, well, in fact, really since the beginning, like Melee has just not really been as good as we had hoped. And I think that a lot of the reason for that is because we needed to kind of go down really like at a pretty low level in the game and kind of actually address some of the fundamentals.
Make Baeclast a bit louder. Roger that. Let's make it a bit louder. Let's go with 69. That's, there we go. That's the number. Let's go.
With like animation system, like action system and like targeting system, like all these different things. And so what I'd like to talk to you about today is like not so much balance, although balance is like a huge obviously element of what we're doing with 370, but actually more to do with like the sort of the types of changes we're making, more to the like the systems and those sort of low level details and in order to make the game a lot better. And what I sort of started doing is I sort of started looking at like what other games were doing and like like playing a bunch of different things and sort of looking at what was going on with that. And I sort of found quite surprisingly like there were a lot of mistakes we were making, just that really basic stuff. So yeah, I'll just sort of walk you through it. So probably the biggest change and the one that you guys
wait, he's literally, they are they Discord sharing Jonathan playing POE? Yo, that's fucking bug.
Be most interested in animation canceling. So I don't know if you guys know sort of what that is. Basically in PoE, normally once you start an attack, you're completely committed to that attack. And that's the first sort of major thing that I knew we really had to do if we were going to fix Melee. So in PoE now, obviously, you can do an attack, but if you start the attack...
That's probably why it was uploaded in the stream. No, he could easily do that. That's not an issue. I can easily stream you showing your Discord, but I think that's basically Baeclast is considered a like kind of like Ziggy and the other sources now. That's actually really nice. Now think about it, that's the Baeclast definitely deserves this. Let's just say that. That's really nice.
Now you can then just cancel right out of it. If it's before the contact point, in which case like you barely anything happens, and then if it's after the contact point,
I mean, yeah, obviously,
got this thing where if like so basically if there's kind of like damage.
I don't think that's the reason why they did this though. I think they would have been fine with just showing it in game like that. But yeah, this was just they did this because the the press release it,
if like so basically if there's kind of like damage, this is where we get MS Paint out, right? So if you imagine like the timeline of an attack, you've kind of got this portion in the middle where you're like doing the damage, you're like doing the swing. So basically you can cancel here and you can cancel here. And if you cancel before the attack, then you can just launch straight into a different attack. And if you cancel after the contact point, then effectively the amount of time that you would have spent doing animation now, you can instead be like running. Then you can start your next attack once that natural conclusion of that animation would have finished.
Wait, does that mean that in order to be most efficient at dealing damage with a melee skill is you cancel it immediately after dealing damage? That's gonna be quite the amount of min-maxing you need to do in PoE now. Oh my goodness. That is actually insane. And most people won't min-max it to the into that level. But if we're talking about the PoE racing, for example, if the animation canceling works for not just melee but for spells as well, that's gonna be such a big thing to learn. Oof. Oof. Oh my goodness. It becomes less useful with more. Yeah. Obviously, end game you probably won't do that, but that's like insane for like leveling and racing. And I wonder how many people will set up auto hotkey whenever you click a specific, key, then it presses the cancel key after, so you don't have to do it yourself. Oh my goodness.
So I mean, it's a little bit hard to show you, but I'll sort of try and go into some attacking. So what you'll notice as I start attacking, is that when as an animation finishes, my character can kind of move immediately as soon as the damage has been done. And that actually changes the feel of combat quite a lot. So it's like quite a significant change. And here, even if I just hold the mouse button down, the game will sort of automatically cancel the attack the moment that the enemy that I'm engaging is dead. And so that's kind of like a huge part of the feel there. So yeah, any sort of questions about that at the outset here?
How would that function with something like multi-strike?
So you can actually cancel. So if I use double strike here, which isn't multi-strike but sort of similar, you can actually cancel at any time while you're not actively doing damage. So basically, like during there's a period between the point where you're doing the first swing and the second swing, where you're able to cancel out of the attack. And so yeah, that's sort of an important one. So yeah, like any other questions about sort of that?
How are you controlling this exactly?
What do you mean? So basically, okay, so to give you specifics here, so basically what I can do is, so if I just click on the person, right, it does the full attack with no cancel, right? If I'm holding down the mouse button, then the moment that the monster dies, the attack auto cancels so long as I've got an action which is further away from what I'm doing.
Oh, that makes it a lot easier.
Where the mouse is. So like to sort of show it here, like okay, if I've got the mouse over here, actually this is another change here. There's actually quite a lot going on with this, but yeah, I mean basically, and so this is what I mean about it being quite hard to explain. Because one of the reasons I wanted to do this podcast is I wanted to kind of show like what it was actually like to play. It's actually really hard to get across in like a trailer or like a like a text post or anything like that. So basically, at any time you can just click to cancel. I shouldn't say at any time. At any time when you're not actually doing the active damage swing, you can click to cancel. But the game has also auto cancel moments where it will cancel if basically if it can see that you're done with the attack because the monster that you're clicking on has died or the target ability has been removed. So yeah, it just ends up being a lot sort of a lot more responsive to play. Like
that's gonna make melee leveling so much faster than it was.
It's sort of surprising, like just the fact that when you're finished doing an attack that you like, if you start the next one in the past, what would have happened is that when you started that next attack, you were completely committed to it. So you kind of do like an extra attack you didn't mean to do at the end of oftentimes at the end of combat, and now that's gone because the you can just click away the.
But what? Okay, so in his setup right now, when he kills a monster with the double strike, if the first swing kills it, he keeps moving. But I am pretty sure he doesn't have attack in place down. Because what would happen then is it would start a new attack, even if the monster died, right? So I'm pretty sure that right now his setup is not having attack in place down, which is gonna make it pretty. He talked about it later. Okay, okay.
The moment you're done, and the character will just be ripped away from doing it. So that's like sort of the first important thing. And the next thing is there's a few different cancellation rules about when you can use one skill versus the other. So like, for example, okay, let's just have a shift attack here. So I'm going to go do melee and then cancel into double strike. So you can see like you didn't, the melee effectively didn't happen. Whereas if I cancel right at the end, then I can't do it until like a little bit of time has passed. So once again, it's a little bit hard to see. But yeah, it just makes the combat feel a lot more fluid, and like you don't get this thing where you sort of feel like I'm sort of stuck in combat, like you know, especially because the other thing that we've done is we made it so that all movement skills are now instant. So that's obviously another big one. What I'm going to do is we've actually also added a bunch of low-level skills because we wanted to. So I'm just going to go skill gem. So this skill here is called dash, which is like the lowest level movement skill. You get it at level 4.
Let's just.
So this skills because we wanted to. So I'm just going to go.
Cheat walk, cheat say, cheat run, cheat beat. So many cheats.
Skill gem. So this skill here is called dash, which is like the lowest level movement skill. You get it at level 4. And this skill, as soon as I press the button, I'm just instantly dashing.
Oh my god!
Once again, I can be in the middle of an attack, like even if I'm in the middle of like doing a double strike or whatever, I can just quickly, like move out of the way at any time. So that movement skill is now completely override. Like anything, even the except for stun, unless you've been stunned. Why am I on fire right now? That looks a bit weird. It's like
The cannibals got you.
Bug here, but anyway, so basically, if you're if any state except for stun, you can always cancel into a move. And so this low-level movement skill here, basically, it's not designed as a sort of traveling skill, so it's got like a small cooldown on it. But you can use that to get out of combat. And we've got the sort of focus actually on several of our low-level at level 4 now. Every class gets some kind of defensive ability like that. So in the case of because now of course you can respond more easily to incoming damage now that you've got basically both the animation cancelling and the instant speed move. Responding to damage is now more of a thing, so we've actually tried to really embrace that. So that's kind of like first thing. So yeah, any questions about any of that before I move on to sort of the next topic here?
So this is obviously motivated by a desire to make Melee feel better to play, and make the game overall feel better to play. But this opens up a lot of space for like even more Twitch response time in a boss fight or something,
exactly,
right?
Exactly, and
like
we actually
that
really
okay.
That. Yeah,
that's exciting.
Yeah, and there's actually a few other features that I'd like to talk about, sort of related to that as well. So, yeah, I mean that's kind of like step number 1. There's actually something kind of interesting, the interaction with things like leap slam. Actually, I'm just going to generate a leap slam here, and I'll need to be level 10. So basically, so this is what leap slam looks like now that it's instant. Oh, sorry, that was not leap slam. That's what leap slam looks like now that it's instant. But what we didn't want to do is have it so that leap slam didn't have the like, we want it to be instant when you're using it to get away, but we didn't want leap slam to be instant when you're just doing it again. So what we actually did is we made it so that if you leap slam repeatedly, you still get the old animations that you did before, and the time is exactly like what it is. But if you leap slam, not having leap slam for a little while, sorry, I'm running out of mana. If you leap slam without having leap slam for a little while, then it is instant like that.
That is so nice.
So basically, the time that you would have spent doing the jump at the start of the animation is appended as a kind of like sort of almost like a cooldown thing at the end of the animation in the form of doing the jump for the next animation, if you sort of get what I'm saying. And so what it leads to is this thing where
not just recent, but a little while. I wonder if that's gonna be. How many seconds is that? Oh my goodness. Misclick.
It's not designed as a sort of traveling skill, so it's got like a small cooldown on it.
I'm sorry.
But you can use that to get out of combat. And we've got the sort of focus actually on several of our low level at level 4 now. Every class gets some kind of defensive ability like that. So in the case of because now of course you can respond more easily to incoming damage now that you've got basically both the animation cancelling and the instant speed move. Responding to damage is now more of a thing, and so we've actually tried to really embrace that. So that's kind of like first thing. So yeah, any questions about any of that before I move on to sort of the next topic here?
So this is obviously motivated by a desire to make Melee. This opens something.
Exactly. Yeah, not like that. So basically, the time that you would have spent doing the jump at the start of the animation is appended as a kind of like sort of almost like a cooldown thing at the end of the animation in the form of doing the jump for the next animation, if you sort of get what I'm saying.
Is
And
that
so what it leads
also
to is this
true
thing
for
where
shield charge and whirling blades?
Yep, it's true.
What is that gonna be? What is that gonna mean for using it for mobility then? I mean, if the overall time for you to do this, the traveling is still the same per leap when you're spamming it as it was before, then it's all fine. But if they made it actually longer that way, that's kind of yikes. I'm not expecting that to be the case, and instead it's just now faster if you haven't done anything, if you haven't leaped in a while, and then the same if you're doing it constant.
All movement skills now instant.
That's really cool. I really like that.
Yeah, so it's kind of an interesting mechanic how that sort of ended up working out. Yeah, so that's that. The next thing I want to talk about is like targeting. So this is something that's when I really looked at it, it was actually quite
Attack leap faster than just leaping. No, that'll never be the thing. With assuming that it scales with attack speed just like it does now, that's never going to be the thing.
Different than what I expected. So in particular, one thing obviously is name lock is like a huge thing. Where when you hold down the mouse on a monster, you name lock on it no matter where you move the mouse elsewhere. But one thing we didn't have before was the capability of rename locking onto another monster when another one dies. So now there's this thing where there's this short cooldown after you finish name locking, where you'll continue to where it will actually move the name lock into another character. So if I'm just holding down the mouse here, I'm not letting go at all, and I'm successfully attacking this entire pack of monsters without having to let go of the mouse, which is actually something that
Awesome.
we didn't have before. And the reason why that's kind of important is because if you're trying to do single target, one of the big issues with it, which is one of the reasons why everyone feels the need to absolutely use multi-strike, is that you can't easily target like all the enemies in a pack when you've got really fast attack speed. Whereas now, once you've got really fast attack speed, your character will just move on from one enemy to the other while just holding the mouse button down, including doing cancels and moves where needed and that sort of stuff, and like actually making sure that you actually hit all of the monsters in a pack. So it actually makes single target a lot more viable in situations where you've got a lot of monsters in a pack. So the actual mechanics of all of this are like quite tricky. There's like a lot of things going on with it, so it's like a little bit, as I said, it's a little bit hard to explain without really trying it. But it is, like it does just make the game feel a lot better. And it's something that I was sort of asking the question of like, why is it that every single character like absolutely has to have multi-strike? And I feel like if the answer is because they want bigger attack speed, I mean, that's obviously fair enough. That's what multi-strike is for. But if the answer is that it's because it makes the targeting feel good, then the thing that we need to do is make the targeting feel better without it, right? And so that's like another area.
Clutch moment there.
So that's target. Now there's quite a lot of things going on in this area. Like if you actually dig into it, like for example, we've now added a thing where if you would click slightly off a monster, and then move on to it like almost immediately, then it will actually name lock to it anyway. So it's like these are kind of little affordances to make it so that you feel like even when you miss, you still manage to actually hit like the thing you were intending to do. There's also now a thing where if you are right clicking on the ground, so you're not name locking, but then you move over a monster, it now actually targets the monster but doesn't name lock. So you can kind of like, I'm going off, I'm doing attacks like this, and then when I move on to the monster, I can still actually target it, which is not something that worked before.
But you can still, for example, target near monsters to purposely miss for like AoE.
Yep, you can. Okay. Yep, you can do that. So that thing there is mostly so that you don't. So there's actually quite a few things going on because there's also the targeting differently with different skills, I should mention. So for example, the skills where someone would want to only target the ground for that reason, then you can still do that. Like we just have different flags on those skills so that they end up being differently. So this behavior is also controllable per skill. Yeah, that's kind of like a few things that are going on there as well. And then once again, the idea here is to actually make it so that targeting is something that is no longer a problem. Like, it doesn't feel like a chore in PoE to target monsters. Like so long as you're pointing at the thing you want to hit, you should actually be able to hit that thing, even when there's large groups and you're hitting monsters one at a time and all that sort of stuff.
So this is all functional with hold still as well, right? Like you can
with shift
still
attack, yeah.
remove
So
name lock. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, everything works correctly there.
Yeah, that's so comfortable for people
yeah.
who are super familiar with melee, I think.
Yeah. So one thing with shift attack is that, of course, your character doesn't move. So that means that, like, if you were actually doing it for a attack, like an actual, like, I mean, mostly by the time you get to end game, everyone's got like quite large amounts of attack range and so on. For whatever reason. But if you were a relatively short range character, you'd probably not want to use shift, because the character being able to move to get to the next monster is kind of important. And the nice thing is that it will do it in the slack time between between the end of the damage phase during the cancel before the next phase. So it's actually possible now for the character to do effectively a free move during that cancellation period to order to close to the next monster before attacking it, without actually having any sacrifice in like number of actions per second. If you sort of get what I'm saying.
Oh yeah.
Two things completely relevant to this. One, where's Nuki? Two, Tarky is not in his room anymore. What is this? Tarky, where are you? It's just like it came out of nowhere. Tarky, where are you, dude? What is this? Are you held hostage? I mean, I know Nuki is doing a podcast with Sis now, like every 2 weeks or whatever. The logical optimism thing. But wait, did he like drop out of Baeclast, or is this just like one-off thing? I don't know.
The racers know what you're saying, that's for sure.
Also, let's go back before attacking it, without during that cancellation period to order to close to the next monster before attacking it, without actually having any sacrifice in like number of actions per second. If you sort of get what I'm saying.
Oh yeah.
I like Rise. Like, oh yeah, we know.
If you sort of get what I'm saying.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, everything works correctly there.
Yeah, that's so comfortable for people who are super familiar with melee, I think.
Yeah. So one thing with shift attack is that, of course, your character doesn't move. So that means that, like, if you were actually doing it for a attack, like an actual, like, I mean, mostly by the time you get to end game, everyone's got like quite large amounts of attack range and so on. For whatever reason. But if you were a relatively short range character, you'd probably not want to use shift, because the character being able to move to get to the next monster is kind of important. And the nice thing is that it will do it in the slack time between between the end of the damage phase during the cancel before the next phase. So it's actually possible now for the character to do effectively a free move during that cancellation period to order to close to the next monster before attacking it, without actually having any sacrifice in like number of actions per second. If you sort of get what I'm saying.
That is very cool and very bad at the same time. Because if you're fighting a boss where, I mean, I guess it's just you have to just cancel it before, like when you realize your character started moving, you have to cancel it and go elsewhere. But so basically, what he's saying, if you have the attack in place and you have a mob here, and you try to hit it, you wouldn't go to him because you're attacking in place. But normally you have a good range on the hit, so it wouldn't matter. But now he's saying that so you shouldn't use it, and that it's gonna be better for overall DPS if you min-max it, because when you kill the mob, you get like quote unquote free movement because of the you start moving towards the next target. But if you have the attack in place, then that doesn't necessarily happen, because if the target is the first target is here and the second is here, so if you kill it without the attack in place and you keep holding and you go there, you like immediately when the mob dies, you do deal damage to it. You start moving towards the next target instead of finishing the swing. But if you have attack in place that cannot happen because you're not in the range of hitting the target, so you're actually like losing on that. But I feel like that's gonna be really iffy for some boss fights if you keep it that way. That's kind of gonna, I guess, just gonna wait and see how that turns out. It makes me a bit worried.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
the racers do what you're saying. That's for sure.
Yeah. So
That's
like, I
true.
mean,
Losing a little bit of extra efficiency. That's
yeah. So I mean, so yeah,
that
it's
is very
actually
good news.
interesting because so okay, so that's kind of interesting. But then just in case you think that we're being too generous with all this stuff, one thing I will mention is the fact that so something I find kind of crazy that we never actually really realized before is that so obviously all spells have cast times, right? But melee skills actually all take exactly your melee weapon time, which is actually kind of weird when you think about it. There's like a bunch of different animations, right? You've got heavy strike, you've got ground slams, and you've got like regular attacks and so on. These are all different animations that are animated by our animators at different speeds, but are actually rendered at the same speed. Like in the game, like everything was just using your attack time. Even things like double strike, which were which is fitting in 2 attacks in the space of 1, was rendering in exactly the same amount of time as your regular melee attack. So one thing we tried to do now is we've actually added on skills the ability to have a attack time multiplier. So attack time multiplier is it currently says D&T on the line.
Attack time multiplier 85%. So basically, that's just like, you know, more speed.
It stands for do not translate because they're not finished with it yet. But the idea here is now we can actually adjust individual skills to be doing like a different speed, which is just something we didn't do before. So in a lot of cases for some attacks, we've actually realized that we can make certain attacks feel more powerful by slowing them down and increasing damage, which is what we've done for generally for the slams and also for the sort of heavy strike style animation things, and we've increased damage to compensate. Now, an interesting point about this is because of the way that animation canceling works now. So this 15% slow down on heavy strike ends up being effectively nothing by the time you've got the animation, because you can cancel about the last 15-20% of the animation anyway. So if you're actually attacking, if you're killing an entire pack in one hit, it ends up being approximately the same amount of total attack time in the end for a skill like this. But it just looks a lot better. Like if I use ground slam here, like if you compare the speed of my regular attack compared to the speed of my ground slam, like now the character looks like they're moving at roughly the same speed, even though the ground slam is actually very slightly slower in terms of like total amount of time to do that action. Because the animation of like, you know, moving to do that ground slam is like a larger motion for the character, now sort of looks more correct. So it just sort of feels more correct as well. And the same is true of heavy strike, where, you know, you get a little bit more of that kind of like wind up and attack stuff. So yeah, that's what we've done with attack speed. So there are quite a lot of cases where we've adjusted this stuff throughout the game, and we're also sort of like obviously increasing the damage a lot to compensate for that stuff. So yeah, and then also sort of relating to that, you might have noticed when I was hovering over the heavy strike there, you'll see that it says adds 1 to 3 physical. So typically on melee gems, there hasn't been any kind of flat damage on the gems, and the reason for that was because that was kind of like I mean, so basically it's the weapons. Sorry, the melee skills were entirely based on your weapon damage. So there was actually one skill that didn't quite exactly work like that, which was double strike. And sorry, where is it on my character here? Double strike. So double strike actually does have flat damage versus bleeding enemies. And it actually is one of the skills that's probably, of all of the melee single target skills, it's probably the only one that actually really sees use. And we should think a reasonably large percentage of the reason for that is due to the fact that it actually doesn't rely on your weapon damage quite as much, because it actually has something that scales up with gem level. So by having something, we're actually planning on having it so that all melee skills have a little bit of stuff that levels up with gem level, in order to make it so that
that's nice.
like we're shifting the balance slightly between like the requirement of how good your weapon is by having a little bit of base damage on the on each of the melee skills.
What? It's interesting. They're gonna lower the base damage. This is gonna be weird for elemental, but This is nice. This is nice for leveling.
So yeah, that sort of helps a little bit with that.
Are weapons addressed alongside that to balance it out, or?
So no, we're not nerfing weapons. We're only just increasing. Oh, I mean, what we're adjusting is the so you've got the what do you call it, deals 90% of base damage here. So effectively we can adjust that number in order to adjust like the percentage that's sort of to make it work out. So effectively, like we're sort of detuning a little bit the requirement of how good your weapon is, just a little bit, and then increasing the amount of damage that you just get inherently in the skill along with level. So that kind of means that you get a little bit better there, and it changes the requirement a little bit so that you don't have to have quite like, you know, because I mean, obviously making a really good top tier weapon is like a huge, is like a extremely expensive proposition, right? So if it effectively means that the median level of weapon is going to be just like a little bit better compared to before, where and then the high end one's a little slightly worse than before. But it's just kind of effectively tuning in that zone to make it a little bit better.
What about builds who want to go pure elemental damage? They level their gem, they can kill themselves exclusively like now.
Confused. So all of these changes, these are all global changes which directly buff melee but will affect spellcasters and everything, right?
So all the stuff like animation cancel, like anything that sounds like a system change is a change, right? Like, so spellcasters do also get the animation canceling. The difference is though that typically the in the spellcast animation, the contact point which triggers the spell is like later in the animation generally. So that means that like they get a little bit less effect out of the cancel due to that. But then they do of course still get the ability to cancel to do the early cancel for just as long, which means that they are getting a you know, they still get the feel benefits that you get from that.
So like they could still cancel mid spell echo, for example.
And you can still cancel mid spell echo. You can, and of course and of course anyone can always cancel into a movement skill. Yeah. So that means that they get they always get that. Now something else you might not have noticed here is that we actually changed the animations. So I'm actually going to make a new area of this area, and one thing I'd like to that you might not have noticed is that actually every melee attack now can hit multiple enemies. So if you've got multiple guys here, I hit all of them with a single strike. So basically, whatever it looks like you should hit with your swing is what you actually hit. So in the past, we used to just only have, you know, we used to only like effectively every single target attack was really single target, right? Now it's not AOE, but basically your weapon range and stuff like that can actually mean that you actually hit a series of guys together if they're standing close to each other.
And that's all scaled by weapon range, right?
Yeah, so weapon range now scales that. Weapon range scales the distance away from your character. It doesn't change the width of the cone. So you kind of get like yeah. So weapon range is good. The other thing we're also doing alongside this, by the way, is that now we've actually committed to every single skill in the game now actually renders AOE distances correctly.
Good job.
And that's kind of what like when there's no longer a thing where you look like you can that you're not hitting something.
It's good map for cleave.
So does that mean? What does that mean for like a 30 weapon range cyclone or something? What does that look like?
Well, I'll show you what that means.
Here we go.
So I'm going to put cyclone in. Oh, actually, I don't have the
because you can get some pretty nutty range with that.
Yep, you can. So we actually changed the effect of cyclone. Oh, I need stats as well. So here's what cyclone
more
now looks like with no weapon range. And then if I go add stat weapon range, I think it is, or melee weapon range plus, let's add like 10 to it. So now you can see.
Oh my god.
Yeah. Wow. So like it's actually okay. So the other thing, of course, cyclone now channeled. So
I didn't see it. Wait.
Let's add like change the effect of cyclone. Oh, I need stats as well. So here's what cyclone
more
now looks like with no weapon range, and then if I go add stat weapon.
Oh no! Wait, it makes way bigger. Never mind.
Melee weapon range plus. Let's add like 10 to it. So now you can see.
Yeah, clearly.
Yeah. Wow. So like it's actually okay. So the other thing, of course, cyclone now channeled. So I just let go when I want to stop. And the other thing as well is it's got different speeds. So if I move the mouse really close, I move really slowly. If I move onto it, I actually stop.
Oh my god!
And then if I move further away, I go faster. So that actually feels really nice.
That's nice.
Speed or move speed controlling that, or a mix of both?
Your move speed. Well, actually, sorry, I should actually. whatever it was that controlled the speed you could move before is
Okay,
controlling the speed now. We haven't changed that.
That is
But basically,
so
there's just
nice
effectively it'll move at half speed
for seeing a
when
target.
you have the mouse close, and then 0 speed when you
Actually,
move
so
further.
nice.
I think there might be like 3 or 4 gradations or something like that. But basically, yeah, when you move further away, it moves faster. We're using the same total, like the speed you move it at in total is still controlled by
Yeah, to stick to bosses exactly.
by whatever it was before. I'm not sure whether it was attack or move
Yeah,
speed before.
sorry.
Yeah.
That's so
I don't
cool.
mean to catch you out with something.
Can you
That's okay,
spin
that's
some
okay,
more?
yeah.
Spin some more, Jonathan. Spin some more. Come on, man.
Okay,
Don't leave us hanging. Spin some more.
Okay, so you want to
We like the spinny boy.
You need
Yeah,
to
yeah, we
remember
like
that
this
like
spin.
we've been wanting like a
That's
proper
beautiful.
cyclone in PoE like since it was first
Yeah.
implemented.
No,
so
I
this
know,
is
It's
huge.
great. So we're very happy. And it is officially
Oh.
channeled, so Castwind channel does work as well, which is something a lot of people asked us at the time. But yeah, no, it's looking good. So you'll notice here, by the way, the difference
just
between
real quick, how does the melee swings interact with something like Ancestral Call, for instance? Because that's where most people got their damage before. And I kind of noticed the melee swings, but I wasn't sure if it's lag, so I don't want to
Yeah,
call you
same.
out.
Yeah,
Does Ancestral Call still target
um,
like the closest mob?
So okay, so basically, with Ancestral Call will still target the same way it did before. Like it will still pick a monster based on the way that it did.
Dude, I want to
before.
do I want to do a
but the Ancestral
Trickster
Calls, the
Cyclone now.
individual swings of the Ancestral Call shadows, or whatever you want to call them,
Trickster
can
Cyclone.
hit multiple guys as well. So like it can lead to like situations where so one other question we wanted to ask and is that, and we actually haven't fully made a call on, is basically for each skill we have to make a call on so for example, let's talk about like Molten Strike, right? So the question would be, if you hit multiple guys with your swing with Molten Strike, do you get multiple ball explosions? The answer to that is currently no, but I kind of wanted to make it yes for as many skills as possible because I think it makes it interesting. Now, Molten Strike like has the issue where it's like there's so many projectiles, we think it might just get a bit too insane if we allow it for that one. But for each skill, there will be the call of like, do things proc on all enemies you hit, or do things proc on like just to the primary location where you're swinging? And yeah, the answer to that is going to be different for different skills.
You might be safest keeping it at a no with Molten Strike,
For
or else you're going to have like
Molten Strike, I think possibly
Pathfinder Molten Strike spawning a million worms on a
I
boss and
was
swinging
really
once.
pushing the designers of like, I really want Molten Strike to work at multiple guys, and they were just like, they weren't having any of it. So...
I do kind of like guys, we have this problem that everyone's using Molten Strike, so at the same time I want to buff Molten Strike with more splash.
I mean, we'll put it this way: if we did make it so it did that, we would also have to lower the damage of the balls, I assume, which is probably why we won't end up doing that. But that's the thing. All right, so I'm going to go down my list here and have a look at a few other things. Oh yeah, there's like, so there are other. I mentioned. Oh yeah, another one. Skill Gem Quick. It's a different name. So here we have a skill called Steel Skin. And this is part of actually, this is now the low level version of Molten Shell.
Yeah.
Yes. So basically now we've got a thing where you can respond to damage by just going like that, and then you immediately have, I believe it's 70% reduction to damage, but capped at a certain value of total mitigation for a given hit, which goes up as the skill gem scales up. So this is once again part of our sort of low level, like you can respond to damage incoming things. So if you see, like if you see something coming towards you, just hit that, and then you can mitigate damage for a little bit of time. So yeah, once again, it's going for that. It's going for that look. Now, Molten Shell actually now works differently as well, because what we wanted to do with Molten Shell was make it so that it was a really viable thing to be using in response for bosses. Because one problem that Armor has is that it works really well against lots of small guys, but Armor does not work very well against bosses. So what we wanted to do with Molten Shell was make it so that it could convert Armor into something that works well against bosses. So the way Molten Shell works now is that it does 75% damage reduction while the Molten Shell is active, up to a cap which is determined by the amount of armor you have. So the more armor you have, the higher the cap. And this means that you can actually use it pretty successfully to have an instant speed button that you can click in order to deal with a large amount of damage incoming as well.
Could you quickly just show it to us?
Yes. I mean, it doesn't look any different, if you know what I mean. It looks like the Molten Shell that you've seen. I'm not sure if we've updated the... we haven't updated the hover, so it doesn't actually look different. But I mean, maybe I can...
Modern cell. Yeah.
Have a look at what we've got.
Hmm.
So
Good old 113.
so we've got a bunch of rowers here, and if I use molten shell, it actually works, as I said, like quite differently. The other thing as well is that the damage it does now is based on the amount of life that you that was reflected by the molten shell. So basically, the more armor you have, the more damage it's also going to do.
So like the harder you
which is
get
kind of
hit, the bigger the shield.
Yeah, exactly. So that's kind of like an interesting change.
That's
That's
really neat.
crazy.
Yeah.
One-
So
You
that's
get double
quite
armor
interesting. So
range.
it's sort of also part of the thing. We just wanted to really increase the number of defensive options for melee. So yeah, you've got those two there, and then we've also buffed Fortify quite significantly. Now there are some mechanical changes to it which I don't quite remember, so I'm going to have to maybe look at and consult my list here.
Whoa, Jonathan.
Yeah, that's a big
Yeah,
one.
yeah.
Just drop casually.
Is there?
Because
there, like,
Fortify, that's used everywhere.
Yeah. No, so
'Cause-
Fortify is really important. I know that they have buffed it. I just don't quite remember the exact change now. I talked with Rory about it earlier. One thing they also have is there are actually things in the passive tree now for buffing Fortify.
There
So
already was.
you can actually invest in it now as well if you want. So that's another useful one. I'm just going to go down my list and see if I can find any some other things to talk about here. Oh yeah, animation queuing. Okay, this is an interesting one. So in the past, if you were like, so there are two different types of players, right? There's the hold down players, and there's click players, right? So in the past, we didn't actually have animation queuing because we found that if you did, then because it was if we were to have queuing, then it would commit you to an attack that you then couldn't cancel. But now that we have animation canceling, queuing is fine, and that actually means that if you're a click player, you actually don't suffer any kind of damage reduction versus people who hold the button down, because like it's now frame perfect. Like as soon as you finish your last animation, you'll queue the next one. And it actually does improve the feel because it means you can queue things like when you're in the middle of a stun. Like for example, if you press the leap slam button while you're in a stun, not only is it instant in the case where you weren't stunned, but it'll actually queue the leap slam for after the stun finishes, and so that means that you don't get that quite so sticky feeling going on when monsters are hitting you. Like you don't have to hit that exact time anymore, like or hold the button down or do anything like that. You just press the button, and the queue will go in there. And there's a few things around queue mechanics about what replaces what and so on that like mean that you tend to get things that this tends to get things right. But yeah, that's like another little detail there to improve the feel of melee combat.
Quick question while you try and remember the Fortify thing. So we've got two new defensive abilities. Well, one rebuffed, one new one. And then we have Dash. Do we have any other like new instant movement skills?
There is another instant movement skill that's designed for spellcasters at low level because we wanted to give them all a low level, but I'm actually not going to show you that right now since we're mostly talking about melee here. So there is another there's another movement skill.
My one question is there anything to prevent people from like using all of these together? Like
So they all share. They all have shared like. Okay, in some cases cooldowns, in other cases like things like the thing I was showing you with Leap Slam earlier where it had that thing where it does the jump if you just jumped. So there's things like that prevent it being instant in the like basically that they share that mechanic, if you know what I mean. If I use like shield charge or something.
So you couldn't just like, for example, rotate between three different movement skills.
No.
Okay.
They're all like that mechanic is fixed to make that work correctly.
Okay.
So like here's instant shield charge. It doesn't have the charge anymore. But if I shield charge repeatedly, you get that sort of extra like weight that you have to do. It's a bit hard to see here, but there's that extra weight.
Especially because
if I leap
Discord is
slam
lagging.
into shield charge, you'll see that I couldn't if I normally leap slam, you see how as soon as I land, I can start walking because it cancels the animation at the end. Whereas if I leap slam into shield charge, then it takes a bit longer to get moving. If you see what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So yeah, those rules kind of like apply across to make sure that all the different movement skills work correctly together.
I mean, the thing which is crazy is, so for me, there's a bit of choppiness happening, but that still looks smoother than current like high attack speed leap slam. So that's like insane.
Right. Yeah, it's like things that
what?
stuff is a lot better, right? Like we really did, we really did improve me. Like it is significantly better. I mean, there's lots of subtle details that I sort of realized when I really started looking into it. Like, I was talking about targeting before. Like, another random example is like, okay, so you're holding down left click to move, and then you press a button to do like a leap slam or something. You don't want to. So then maybe leap slam is the best example because it actually engages you. But like, okay, let's say I'm holding click to move, and then I left click to do like Okay, Ground Slam's actually a good example, but I don't have it in right now.
Also, quickly, sorry, do you mind going back to the previous era? I think that Ice Nova Shrine is what was causing the lag that I was seeing.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so too. It's like it's working fine, and then you move.
You just
and
moved
it
slightly
lags.
close to it, and then it was like a bit choppy. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
this is
that's
just the
much-
stream
yeah, that's
delay.
much
So
better.
the actual
Yeah.
game's running flawlessly for me. It's just So that didn't mean to do that.
That's cool.
Right, so if I'm holding down to move, and then I press Q, I get like a ground, like it actually
we
does
have
an
that,
automatic
people?
shift attack of the skill that I clicked because I'm still holding move. So you can kind of like do things on the run.
Will this
that's like
solve
another-
that weird problem we used to get where our characters would get stuck on like lock boxes and chests?
Name locked to them. Yeah.
Because we could, in theory, automatically cancel. Do you kind of know what I mean? Like, you'd go to open a chest, you'd click away, but your character would be like dragged back towards it.
Mm-hmm. If you're holding down the button, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh right. Yeah, I think I know it. Yeah, you know, I'm actually going to check on that specifically because I don't know the exact like what exactly was causing that. But I like if once again, that's good to it's good to tell me about stuff like that because it means that I can actually look and make sure that's fixed. But yeah, we're trying to fix like all of these different cases. So you know, yeah.
And we're kind of getting a bunch of Christmas presents here. This is
Yeah.
wonderful, but I am curious if there's been any changes to collision with move skills in particular, if you guys have looked at that at all. Because that's probably one of the larger complaints I have in particular with something like shield charge.
Okay,
where
so
you'll
you're
be like
referring
trying to charge perpendicular and you'll just
Yeah.
hit the wall that you're next to over and over.
So for that one, that just requires making sure that the shield
Beppels
charge is
OP.
going where you really intend to go. So it's not really so much a collision thing as it is making sure the Pathfinder picks the right decisions. We have actually made updates to the Pathfinder, which we'll mention in a little bit as well. Actually, no, let's just go into it now. Okay, so here's an interesting thing. So what we actually found is, and this sort of shows you how low level we're kind of going here. So one of the things we found was that when we actually, you know what? Sorry, I haven't really. One thing I never really went into very much was the
From
hitting
A to
multiple
B
guys
to
thing.
C to back to A
Because
to
that's
D.
actually,
And
there's an important point I wanted to make about this, which is if I look on our tool here. So now we actually
like he talked about one thing, then he's like, no, I will talk about that other thing, and then he goes on another thing into another thing, and then
like every attack has got like a damage range like this. And one thing we really did was we made sure to get the timing on everything correct. So as you're swinging through guys, you can see that
It's not instant; it actually travels through.
It's not like an instant point. There's actually like a sort of period where like it actually goes through the guys. So this was like a system that we were changing over to. And the thing is that actually we're also going to do the same thing on monsters. Like if I open Hillock here, let me just find Hillock.
Oh man,
here's a monster.
Did this require like how much effort did this take to do this to like every attack?
A lot of effort.
Actually match it to the 3D space it's moving through.
Okay, so there's like Hillock. That cone is rendering a little bit weird there, but you can see basically the attack that he does. And then, for example, here's like attack 2 unarmed, where he's like swinging, like he's taking like a sort of round. What do you call that? Haymaker, I guess. I don't know. I don't know boxing. So you can see like it kind of like does the swing, right? So anyway, when we moved to this, what we found is that our old distance metrics we were doing were just not sufficient. So we actually used for melee attacks, we use like a thing called Manhattan distance, and between 2 squares. If I render the like boxes, the collision tier of everything, you can see that every entity in the game is actually a square. Like the player there is that little square, and when we actually started to do things where we wanted to have lots of cone shapes and all that sort of stuff, we realized that we actually needed to the distance metric of POE, as it's called. So we now use the Euclidean distance. If programmers should know what I'm talking about, and that's kind of cleaned up a lot of the feel of so when we did that, we also had to adjust the Pathfinder to use that type of distance, and then we had to then when we did that, we realized that that we had to change from using 4-way pathfinding to 8-way pathfinding. So that is to say, in the past, the actual character would only the Pathfinder would only look like north, south, east, west. And then basically if you had to move it on a diagonal, it would be like going like that. Now the character actually moves along diagonals like on the coordinate grid, and so that lets you slip between a lot of places you weren't able to slip between. So the reason why I mentioned all of this and why this all came out was because you were talking about shield charge, clipping on borders. I would say now that we've actually made it so that the Pathfinder and the collision detection and the and then target what I should say the target finding code and all that sort of all now agree on the same kind of way of doing distances and the same way of understanding targets. So you shouldn't ever get that thing anymore where the Pathfinder thought from here you could go somewhere, but the game, when you actually cast something, it wasn't actually able to get there. Like those kinds of bugs, you know what I'm talking about? Like you fire a projectile, and it didn't hit the guy because it hit some clipped on some wall, these kind of things, right? So that was all quite a long and roundabout explanation, but basically we've improved.
I wonder if that means that when you shoot something near a wall, say freeze pulls, it doesn't clip on the fucking wall or a doorway, and instead of, you know, because that's big.
All that stuff quite significantly.
What
I'm trying to get at here.
Like it wasn't a targeted thing like let's go and fix shield charge mobility. It's more just a knock-on benefit of going down.
Right. Exactly. But it also does mean you can kind of weave through monsters a little bit better because of that diagonal move. That like there's more space for you to move around, so that it does actually help, and means things can sort of pack around a little bit nicer and just generally improves things.
So does that also make like dodging enemies feel more consistent as well?
Well, absolutely. So this is a huge area that we did. So actually, I'm actually ashamed to admit that one thing I didn't realize that the game had. Okay, so it turns out that the collision cone, the old thing for monsters where for dodging attacks was entirely based on distance and didn't care where the monster was facing. And now that we've actually added the actual collision cones, it means that you can actually dodge sideways around.
That's what I was talking about when I on the trailer where he was like dodging the hillock. When I said you can actually dodge sideways now, it's talking about that now. Because previously you could like literally be behind, like when the swing starts and you move behind it, you still get hit. That's also why sometimes when you like, let's say that you leap or something like that, when you time the leap, you actually die mid-air even though you're past the dude that hit you, and then you ended up dying on there. Like let's say there's a guy here, you're here, it hits you there, and you leap past it, and then you die at this point in the air when you're already behind it because of the distance check or whatever.
A monster to dodge their attack, and like if I actually show you, and like this was another thing that I really did. I said, okay, if we need to be able to make Hillock feel like a reasonable fight. If we can't make Hillock feel good, then we're not doing it. So anyway, now you can actually dodge Hillock like really easily. You can. Oh, sorry, I'm just punching these zombies while I'm at it. I might be a little bit high level and like take Hillock out and just single hit, but I'll just if I don't here. Okay. So Hillock hits me. Let's just verify that's all working. Yep, Hillock's going to me. And now you can actually dodge kind of sideways. And then depending on what his attack, like how his attack animation is, it will sort of change where you can dodge. So if I damage him down so that he pulls his sword out, and his sword attack tends to either come from above or it comes from the side. And so that means that when you're dodging, you actually dodge right rather than dodging left. Because if you dodge left, you get hit. Whereas if you dodge right, you actually don't. And that's kind of interesting because it's actually
oh my god!
Like so, like you can actually see it. Like in the asset viewer. If I see the attack 1, this is a from above attack, so it goes like that. Whereas attack 2 sword is like that coming round. So it's actually like we actually have this all on now with proper damage stuff. You can actually see where the monster's going to hit, and when you dodge out of the way of it, it actually works correctly. So yeah, that's like a.
What I'm getting from this is that you guys really want to make a lot more boss fights.
Yeah,
like,
you really want.
Fights, but yeah, like this stuff has just been like a
that's gonna that's gonna make some boss fights so much better to play now. Where they like you start one of the bosses start like a swing. Like think about Owl, right? Owl does like the cleave, and then after the cleave you get the icicles. The cleave starts from like right of him. And like you basically got hit from it, even when you're at the other side of him, just because of the fucking check thing.
the funny thing about it as well, when we actually, so one thing we realized when we added all this dodging stuff and like making that, what we realized is we actually had to like, especially early game, we actually had to buff monsters because that was actually a problem where it's like, okay, now it's so easy to dodge like and so on. And so then we're like, okay, well, let's actually think about what we actually want to do. So the next thing we realized that we wanted to do was actually make it so that monsters have way more signaling with their attacks, and then when they hit harder. So we buffed damage. And then also increase their attack time. And then in order to do that, we actually started to add a system where we can now have. So we're now got a system where as the it's all right. So imagine you want to slow down like a monster's attack. The problem that you get is that you get like the sword just like sliding through the air really slowly. It looks really bad. What you actually want is like when the monster like goes to do the attack, you want it to like go up and then have the sort of hold position up here where it's like only moving really slightly, and then still do the slash as fast as possible. So you actually did that with Hillock. If I do that again, you might be able to notice it. It is quite subtle, but like it actually makes a huge difference when you compare it to the non-version. So he actually like, the hell? What's he doing? Oh, there we go. I think his AI just took a second to engage. So his like pullback for the punch is like way slower, but the part is the same is the same duration as before. Let me just.
Does it mean that we can't face tank him anymore? Paper hands.
Okay, what's going on here? Why has he got? Why am I not doing any damage to this guy?
You spawned Uber Hillock. It's 1% chance.
Oh no.
Oh,
You're
you're
too
right.
high
I
level.
actually did.
Yeah, you can see the sword in him.
Oh my god.
I was like, what the hell's going on here?
I'm sorry, Jonathan.
Yeah.
You
No, you're
really
actually
need
right.
to
It's
commit
got
to the fight. You have
Yeah,
to commit
it's
to the
actually
fight.
got the sword in there. I'm just gonna do that again.
No.
There are people farming
What?
like 12 hours to get there.
Kill this thing. Come on, get it.
No, okay. I actually come on. It's gonna take me forever. I'm just gonna use it. There we go.
There you go.
Yeah. Okay. Right. So anyway, so his actual attack speed has been slowed down a lot, but he's got what we call slow zones in his attack animation. Where
Yeah, because he's over he's over 7 now.
So like notice his attack animation, he kind of has this wind up that takes longer, and then the actual slash is preserved in speed. I've never actually done this with Uber Hillock, and I worry that the animation set is different, and I'm concerned that this is like ruining my demo. Right, just gonna use the cheat to get rid of him. But anyway,
Whoa.
So basically the idea here though. Yeah, like we can kind of get this anticipation and build up in the different attacks and actually have that, and then and so you can actually dodge them, or you can use things like the the steel skin and stuff like that in order to actually respond to those events happening. And so that's something we really want to do. And so we actually revisited a huge number of the monsters. So if you look at what Fire Fury does now, so for example, if you look at the changes we did here, so when she uses her Firestorm, it's a much tighter area. But much more firestorm. So like it does more damage, but you can move out of the way. And like that's an exact kind of stuff we want to do, right? So basically we're increasing damage, but making dodgeability is kind of the theory. She also now, of course, does flame dash, and she's also got a staff attack to attack you with, and so on. But even you'll notice that like, her attack there, when she attacks you, there's so much more of a wind up than there would have been on a normal POE attack before. You can really dodge those melee attacks. So yeah.
Could you show us Hail Rake? I feel like that'd be a good example.
Sure, yeah.
I'm just curious. Is there any like worry that this might be a pretty significant buff to slowdown effects though? So like things like temp chains, chill, aspect of the spider. Because if attacks are a little slower on the wind up and more readable already, if you're slowing them down even further, then they kind of become a joke to just avoid, right?
We will. I am sure that our balance team is thinking about this. Like this is actually, I mean, there's a huge amount into the sort of monster rebalance stuff. Now, I should mention that it's not every monster that's getting this treatment. We're actually doing, we're actually concentrating on early game for this more, where the attack speed.
That's also the other way around.
But we do plan on doing it like more and more of the game over time.
Since they'll be doing more damage now, when their attack speed scales up, or you get slowed, you are so much more fucked.
So right now, I think it's like all the monsters in acts 1 to 3 we're currently doing, but in like and plus the versions of those that like end up in rows are changed all through the game. You know what I mean? But like we will actually get to all of them over time. The oldest ones are the ones that had the worst problems. So that's kind of why we're focusing there. Like the oldest monsters were definitely had problems.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So does it look like Helric now casts Frostbomb and has a prettier looking GC?
Yeah. So I mean, as we were just going through, we just like improved things like this. So basically, all the sort of like all the different uniques. Oh, and that's the other thing as well. They did like life a lot too of this thing. And then the other one as well that we did was just due to a lot of these buffs, we've also increased. So I have this kind of thing where it's like I feel like the game has been getting too easy, especially early game. There's this thing where a lot of things have been nerfed over time, or else the game, like the skills and so on, have gotten more powerful over time. It means that early content has really just not been challenging anymore. And a quintessential example of this kind of thing happening to me is the goat men in the climb. So the goatmen in the climb have this explosion effect when you hit them with melee. They've got molten shell, in fact, right? So they've got molten shell on them. Mm-hmm. And the problem is that people are like, I go to hit these molten, these goatmen, and they cast molten shell like right at the last moment when I'm hitting them, and then I end up exploding and kills me. So therefore, the designers were like, okay, we kind of have to lower the damage on this so that it doesn't really do much damage anymore in case that happened. But really, that was not really the correct solution there. The right solution would have been to make it so that if you're in melee range of the goat, then he doesn't cast that skill. And that means that this damage can still be higher, like, it can still be actually a thing you have to play around and actually avoid, or like worry about hurting yourself with that, without having the dumb thing where like, there was no way I could have avoided this, right? So that's the kind of stuff where like we need to make smarter decisions with regard to just AI in some cases in order to make it so that we can actually buff the monsters and make them do more damage and actually feel more dangerous. And so that's like, one of those things we're really doing, but also just like making sure that like all these monsters that we haven't touched in a really long time have just got the life they need to actually become challenging again, and all that stuff, just readdressing all that stuff. And as we were looking through it, we just found so many bugs and problems with like AI, like that some of the monsters weren't even using the skills that they had just due to AI bugs. And it's like when people don't look at things for a while, they just tend to rot and break and like stuff goes wrong. Like one of the things we noticed was like Hillock, his contact point and his animation before, like when he was using the old system, like single target and he just hits a guy, his contact point was in the wrong part of the animation. So it's like he takes a swing and like the damage was being applied like before the actual sword like hit you. And it's like no wonder people say that melee combat in PoE feels clunky. Truly the first boss of the game is like got damage timing, and it's like all it takes is like someone to look at that and like and actually focus on that stuff again, and it really improves that stuff. So yeah, like I think that just getting all those little things right is just the feel of the game just so significant.
I mean, it's heartening that as the example you gave, you saw Hillock's attack time isn't correct, and the response was, let's change how attacks work entirely.
Right.
I mean, obviously more than just to address Hillock, but still, it's heartening.
Yeah. So I'm going to go back to my list here and see what else. Oh yeah, okay. So here's another few. So accuracy is now capped at 100%.
You cut out
cut out at the end there, but I'm assuming you said instead of 95%.
Yeah, exactly. So accuracy no longer has a cap anymore. So basically, the problem here was that so basically, like everyone is either res tech or crit build. And so we were like, okay, why does everyone to use res tech? And the reason why is because if you're doing a one-hit KO of a pack, it really sucks when 1/20th of the pack didn't die. So you're going from like I need to do one hit and killing all the monsters to I'm doing one hit and killing another one. So this is like in the case of a white pack, right? So the idea here was it's like, okay, what's the reason for this 95% thing? Like why have we got that? And the answer actually kind of comes back to D&D. Like it's just kind of the whole like critical miss 1 in 20 thing, totally just like a D&D thing. And it's just kind of like grandfathered in through like over time.
Does that mean? Oh, sorry, go on.
Yeah, it's just one of those things that's kind of grandfathered in through various games, turn into a thing. And we actually really thought about it. We're like, okay, there's actually really no reason for this. What we actually want is for people to be able to be getting 100% hit chance on white monsters, so that monsters that are like, champions and rares can actually have, which have more life.
That's massive for
can actually have more evasion and be okay. Like basically, we want to make sure not everyone needs to have res tech, right? Like res tech is a damage boost, but it's not a damage boost so much against like white monsters. It's just a damage boost against like like rare monsters and stuff like that. And also we've just generally we've fiddled around with the accuracy equations and increased the sources of accuracy that you get, so that getting to 100% is not like a problem. For regular play. If you're like you might need it on a few items, but in general you're going to be able to. So it also means that we can the monsters that are more evadey, they're only likely to really be evaders, if you know what
That's
I
a
mean.
massive buff for a
whereas
jug.
when they're just
Great
regular
jug.
white monsters, they're not going to be so annoying in that way. And in a similar vein, block. So we actually weren't using block on many monsters, and the reason why was because same problem, right? Like you just get having monsters in a pack that just don't die is super annoying. So like the designers were sort of incentivized to remove it. But the actual solution was we've just made block into a thing where on monsters block. Now, okay, I should say on players it's been left alone, but on monsters, when a monster blocks, it just takes reduced damage. I can't remember the exact percentage, but it's a reasonably high percentage. But what it means is white monsters are no longer going to be blocking their way into surviving your hit anymore. So that means you can actually put block on more monsters, because then it's like a thing. It's just about monsters that have shields now or will actually block, and it means that but they'll still die probably if they're whites, whereas they probably won't if they're champions or rares. Obviously it depends on how much damage you're doing, right? Some people just like wipe out rares in one hit, but the theory being that it improves that sort of play there. And actually makes dealing with block something to potentially think about. I mean, there's a few stats for it now.
Block and spell block, or just block?
I think it's true of spell block as well, but I don't 100% know that. I would have to check with someone. They probably changed spell block at the same time. I just don't know 100%.
Because this definitely sounds like something melee players could get upset over. Because we've been hearing a lot of like improvements, but we haven't really heard a whole lot about buffs.
Said before, players don't have that happen to them. Just monsters.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So for players still block 100% of damage when they block, but monsters do not anymore.
Oh, okay.
And that's just to address that problem of like, you want to kill the pack and the white monster, just one of them randomly blocks and then and then doesn't die, which was just annoying. And so now it just allows us to put block on more monsters.
Also, realistically, you'll probably never notice it in maps because you'll do so much damage that even if the white monster had 50% damage reduction, you probably still one-shot.
Exactly. Yeah. That's exactly my point, right? Whereas on a rare, where like the rare is actually like you've got a lot of life, then you actually do notice it and it actually does a mechanic there. Yeah. So yeah, that's the sort of the benefit.
It should also make leveling feel a lot better, because one thing that you don't get it as much now, but I remember this a lot in like the early desync days of PoE, because of how like accuracy and stuff worked. You couldn't tell if you were hitting the mob or lagging. So now the fact that accuracy is better, and even if they do,
speaking of that,
actually, go on. Yeah,
you reminded me of something as well. The other thing we did is finally made Miss a thing that is told to the game client now. Now we're not fully utilizing this as much as we did before. So basically, like before, if you just like do a swing and you'd hit nothing, that was equivalent to a swing where a monster was there but they dodged you. Or rather, I shouldn't say dodge. I should say they evaded you because you missed. Now the game client actually is told about the miss, and that means that we can actually place effects or sound and also respond to misses as a mechanic more. So we're not utilizing this too much now. We do just have like a miss sound effect that you can sort of hear, so you can tell when you're missing. But that is like something that we might be able to explore more in the future, as well as like using like actually dealing with miss in a better way. And so that's a useful thing.
That's really cool.
It's even potentially like design space for some interesting uniques that work around when you miss.
Exactly. All right, so that's you just keep going. Oh yeah, there's another one. This is actually a balance change. So we were looking into what does melee need in terms of defensive, and something we realized is that an area that melee should be better at than spells is stunning. So stunning is super important for hit feedback. But the thing we realized is we could do a lot more to from spells in the stunning area by doing a few adjustments. So the first one is that the base stun duration of melee is made longer, and the base stun duration of spells is now shorter. So for people, if you're already far back, you don't really care about the exact like number of milliseconds in the stun as much for spells. So it really really wasn't a huge deal for them already. For melee, when you're up close and personal, you really do care about the amount of time you're stunning for. So we have increased the base duration of melee a bit. I can't remember the exact amount. Something like, I think like spell went down like something along the lines of 20% and or maybe 25 or something like that. And then melee went up by some amount like that as well. The other thing we also did as well is that the amount of damage, we made it so that spells count for less than melee does in terms of damage. So melee gets a bonus amount, something, I don't know what the exact final numbers are, but something like 25%, the damage counts for 25% extra in terms of doing stuns. And the other thing we've also done on top of that as well is that elemental damage counts for less than the physical damage does. So if you're playing melee, you're doing longer stuns and more. If you're playing physical melee, you're doing even more stun because of the fact your damage counts for more. So that's actually differentiating physical a little bit as an element. And by the way, that physical bonus I just talked about how physical counts for more in terms of doing stunning, also works for physical spells as well. So physical now actually does get a little bit more of a difference compared to the elemental spells. Like, it's got more of a thing for it to do, which is to say to do with stunning.
And that you may not actually have the answer to this, but just in case, that reduction in terms of the amount of damage you need to do to hit a stun, that sounds very much like reduced enemy stun threshold in terms of the stat. Is it actually that, or is it multiplicative then?
It's multiplicative. Yeah, it's a more style thing. So it is like a base thing that is applied on top of, well, I should say before everything else, I believe. So because it's actually applied directly to the amount of damage you're dealing, so it's a little bit different than the way the other one works. The exact details, I did certainly clarify that it is done independently of those other stats, but the exact mechanics around how it's applied,
yeah, that was all I was curious about. That's really neat.
Is there a cap? Because currently people stun a lot of things in the game, like really big boy things. So
there, I believe at this time there isn't a cap. Okay, so the thing with stun is I think that in order to actually really stun like bosses and stuff like that, it's pretty heavily in stun. I don't believe it is my understanding that you don't invest in it, you don't have a chance of stunning bosses at all at the moment.
Yeah. But, if you're not invested, for sure.
Yeah, if you're not invested in it. But anyway, we just wanted to improve that element of melee in general. So yeah, we've adjusted the numbers. Once again, for exact details, you're going to have to see patch notes / whatever. But I'm just sort of telling you, like, from a high level, what we sort of want to do. So yeah, from a high level, thinking was distinguish melee from non-melee, and distinguish physical from non-physical in terms of stunning, as terms of their stunning properties, to make that a little bit better.
Along those lines, are there any other specific changes you made to just melee to give that little extra bit of something?
You mean with regard to what I was just talking about with stunning, or just in general?
Just in general, because a lot of these changes are like
I've got a giant list here. I haven't finished going through this list yet.
Let's get
to the next bullet point.
Let's just keep on going here. Okay, I talked about low-level monsters making the game harder. You must have slow zones, attack component stuff. Just oh yeah, okay, right. I'm just going through the list. I'm kind of getting. We'll get back to balance.
Man.
Okay, so then there was just bug fixes in the animation system, and I was kind of surprised how much crap there was here. And the kind of examples of like a few of these is like, okay, this thing where when you are blending, every animation's got a blend in time and a blend out time, which is basically the amount of time we spend blending into the animation, out of the animation, and then we do the largest of those, and that's the final blend that you get in the animation. So an example of the kind of bug we had was we were accidentally multiplying the speed of the wrong animation into the blend calculation. So you'd end up with a situation where like you'd be doing a run and then you do an attack, and then the blend time into the attack was like longer than the attack was. So the first attack after a run would look like really janky depending on what the attack speed was. Like this kind of like little details like that were actually like affecting the game quite a lot. It's like, once again, just it's all just about like finding these little bugs and fixing them. They just contribute to the feel. There was like a few other things around this, like with regard to animation times. We had this thing where like events that were during animation, like contact points and so on, they would happen at the end of the frame always. Now they can actually happen in the middle of a frame, which is actually kind of important because sometimes they change things about how the frame will continue from that point onwards. And so that can actually mean that like it actually has a meaningful impact on like, like how attacks are, and it just makes everything feel better. So yeah. Little details of that. Okay.
Not getting completely smashed by whippers, even though you're 5 yards away from them.
I hope that will affect things like that. If that's it just generally improves like the way the events work.
I imagine that would also help out a lot in situations, you know, like the first 3 acts, like you were talking about with, you know, buffing those bosses and designing around those. Like, it sounds like all this stuff is just going to make it feel much smoother to play PoE in a lower attack speed, lower cast speed environment.
That event timing one in particular, we really noticed that at the point where we started doing the exact damage timing and zones and everything like that, because as soon as we did that, it became really obvious that stuff was wrong, and that we had to fix it.
Just real quick question about the damage before we move on. Is there like an approximation of how much things have changed for the damage values? I understand that it's different from case to case basis, but
yeah, I really don't want to go into that because like as I said, I'm here to give you sort of balanced strokes about how we're improving melee in general, but I'm not going to go. I think, like for example, I could tell you that like we've like buffed single target melee like quite significantly. Like there are large damage boosts to those skills. Like we're actually, and also like trying to make it so that each skill that wasn't used has some kind of place. And then the other thing as well, when I was talking before about the damage boost that flat damage on melee skills, a lot of the time we're adding stuff like that and then just not decreasing the damage from your weapon and things like that. So yeah, like it's getting it's relatively significant in some cases, less significant.
I was more talking about the mobs.
He's scared for his early hardcore runs.
I actually don't know as a percentage, honestly. Just enough to make it feel hard. I like so the designers are the ones actually buffing the numbers. I'm playing feels still too easy still. This feels too hard still. So I actually don't know the exact number kind of on that kind of stuff.
Was this like a sort of a design philosophy change? Because PoE, I mean, there were interviews and things in the past where it was more like, oh, PoE is meant to be played with a TV in the background and whatnot, and now it seems like this will require a much more active, paying attention sort of approach.
I think that it will depend a lot on what you're playing. Like there's certainly still a place for mindless map play, but you need that moment where like, okay, now suddenly I have to care about the monster, just sort of happening from time to time. So it's kind of like we still want to support that. It's just about making sure that like, okay, when you actually do get to the boss,
I'm gonna be extremely happy if all the low levels, so basically the racing stuff, is actually gonna be so much more I guess engaging word here, like that you actually have to try to dodge things now. It's gonna be nice, and like trying to minimax all the animation cancel is gonna be interesting.
Fight like now that's a meaningful thing you have to care about, like all the damage zones and everything, but getting that correct and just making sure that's fine. But I think that the changes in terms of like the really having to pay attention and like making the game harder, that stuff I would say affects the earlier game more than the later game. Like you start to get to the point late game where like the numbers matter more than the actual like moving around and dodging and all that sort of stuff, just because attack speeds get so high and like what sort of stuff. So it kind of like tends to fade away a little bit. But at the beginning of the game, it makes a much larger difference. And I do want like the beginning of each league to always feel like a bit more intense than the latest stuff. So
perfect.
I think we want to. So what have we got here? I've got a note that says reducing reliance on elements. Now I don't actually remember exactly the details around this one, but I think that like there are a few specific
animation animation canceling for Reeve. One of the biggest issues for Reeve was that if you were like just out of AoE or something like that, it felt so bad. But at the same time, do people now want to start playing Reeve without attacking plays? So that they get the animation cancel and they move immediately to the next mob? Gonna be interesting.
details about like, I mean, I was told like a few, once again, balance is not my area, but I was told a few things, like for example, they were reducing the elemental damage on abyssals but increasing it on base weapons, and a few other things like that in order to sort of address like some of the problems that we had with, I believe the abyssals were like too like they were too required
they
to have
stacked
reasonable...
very well with one another.
yeah, exactly. So there's the other things here. We talked about stuns. Oh yeah, we've added a bunch of new support gems. Once again, I believe that like spoiler season is going to be revealing a bunch of. There are ones now that are specific to each of the different weapon types, which are quite interesting. I've also got things to reward slower and larger hits. Some support gems designed around that. And a few other, just quite a few little things.
Just quickly on that, when you say for different weapon types, are we talking like every single weapon type, or would it be like?
So each weapon type has a support gem dedicated to that.
That's really cool.
Yeah,
that's I thought you would be like cheap and be like, oh, daggers and claws and like axes and maces.
I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure there's one for each. I know.
That's really cool. That's really cool.
What have we got here? Oh yeah, that's right. This is like random mechanical. Okay, so like as some ideas, like when we were going through different skills and talking about like how we can make. So what an example of a really challenging one of those was like Glacial Hammer. Because I was like, how can we make it so that Glacial Hammer matters as a skill? Like, how do we make someone choose to use it? So an idea that we came up with for it was actually having it so that Glacial Hammer is okay. So I talked about having how we've got chains now, so we can do like attacks. So like now we've got these things where rather than just picking a random animation, it now does them in chains. What we're actually going to do for Glacial Hammer is Glacial Hammer is going to actually have a 3-chain where it goes slash slash and then big slash. And then the third one is actually going to have massive increases to the freeze stats that it has. So it'll actually be possible to freeze bosses much more applicably with a Glacial Hammer, but you have to invest in 3 attacks in a row in order to do it. So this is kind of a way to make it like a reasonable investment. You actually get a freeze on bosses, and it actually works with party play a little bit. So this is the kind of thing we can do to order make a skill like that actually usable. And so yeah. Just random example. There's also
Ignite Glacial Hammer build incoming. Oh, can't wait.
Oh, pro so, the big hit.
We're also looking like a few other examples, like how can Melee really dominate in terms of like mobility and like making those things. So another thing we did was like, okay, so Slam now has always stun on monsters on full life. So as an initiator, it works really well. Like you leap in and they actually get the stun. And the thing that when I was talking to Mark 2 about this, is like, I need to see the twirls. I need to see the spinny twirls. That was like
I wish that stun on full life instead was something like stun on 90% life. Personally. There's so many random things that can lower like monsters' HP before you actually hit them, and yeah. Something like that. I don't know. I just feel like the full life is
the thing, you know what I'm talking about? How like, if you do long second stun, you get a little icon. Yeah. So exactly, that's the kind of thing I need to make sure is like, to make it actually feel good, right? As an initiator.
I thought you were talking about two-handed duelist leap slam for a moment, and
on the stuns.
No,
same is true of shield charge. Actually, shield charge now does stun based on distance that you shield charged. Which I think it actually already had that, maybe, but it's been reworked now to make it so that you actually do get you do feel like the stun when you slam into a bunch of guys. You do get that
independently from the weapon damage.
Actually, let me tell you something about shield charge. Shield charge has actually changed to use shield damage now. So shield damage is calculated in the same way as
shield throw.
Yeah, shield throw, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. So that actually means that that's
really strong.
So it doesn't do that.
Dense fossils and stuff. Like the only thing holding back shield damage from being absurd is that spectral shield throw feels like crap.
Right.
Because its hitbox is
improved a lot, by the way, by slowing down the animation. That thing I was telling before.
Oh, yeah.
That's slowing down the throw improved that significantly. And also, but bear in mind, whenever we slow an animation now, we also increase damage. So like to make the DPS the same, but then plus in addition to whatever other buffs we're doing. There's also that like general thing. So yeah, that skill feels a lot better now, I will say. All right.
Yeah. I'm glad.
I'm just got a few random like bits of shrapnel to throw out there that I just have on my note list.
Okay,
is that daggers are getting a caster dagger variant that doesn't
20
roll
minutes
attack
more
mods.
plasma.
Staves are getting a war staff variant that doesn't roll caster mods.
Wow.
Wait,
Pretty
what?
useful.
Okay.
That doesn't roll attack mods. Getting a caster dagger variant that doesn't roll attack mods. Staves are getting a war staff variant that doesn't roll caster mods.
Wow.
Be useful.
Okay.
Yeah.
How about
Are we
months?
talking about one weapon specifically, or like
no,
a
it's
bunch of them?
series of them, so you get them.
Wow.
I think what we did is we
Okay.
took like I believe I'm not 100% sure they took like some of them and turned them into like some staffs are now war
I mean, it
staffs
could be
and some
both.
daggers are now and I think they're called rune daggers. Are the ones that only
Makes
roll
sense.
custom. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah.
A runic rune dagger. That sounds awesome.
Yeah, well, I wonder if they thought of that one. I don't know about that. But
I mean, we've got
this is the item classes.
shaping sword of Elder's sword of the
Right.
Elder.
True.
Right. So that is for the most part the bottom of my list here of just talking about changes. So I mean, there are obviously more changes. This is just kind of like an overview of like what sort of stuff you can expect. Obviously, there'll be like patch notes and a whole bunch of balance changes and all sorts of stuff. But I mean, this kind of gives you an idea of the kind of like the scope we're talking about in terms of like actually changing the game to make things feel good. So yeah.
Damn.
Any questions?
Yeah. For instance, you mentioned the armor stuff. A lot of people expected an entire overhaul of the armor system. Do we have like an estimation as to how much armor approximately you're going to need to truly benefit from the new way Molten Shield works? Is it like 10,000 or is it more like
I can't give you the numbers on that, unfortunately. I just don't know.
Gotcha.
But
Okay.
I mean, put it this way: the goal of this was to make armor work in boss fights. So, like, if we're not achieving that, then we're screwing up. So, I'm hoping that you'll be satisfied by that.
Do you happen to know if there's been any changes specifically to retaliation skills?
That was mentioned.
Things like riposte and all that.
I think there is something to do with that, but I just don't quite remember.
That's all right.
Yeah. I'm not, what kind of changes are you thinking of?
As long as it's something, it's pretty good.
Yeah, I just felt that they probably were in need of some attention since they're not really in a spot where
they were
build around them.
They were on the list of melee skills to be rebalanced, so I assume that they will get whatever balance attention they need.
Okay.
From that perspective.
Just a question. So last time we had you on, I think 6 months ago, whenever it was, we asked about like action bar space and how it was limited, and you said maybe it'd be a thing.
Yeah.
It
we
seems
still
like
got around to that one.
Yeah, but I'm just saying that it seems like it's even more important now since you're adding all these extra instant buttons for melee and casters.
Quite possible. Yeah. Quite possible.
Okay.
You know, something interesting that we're actually experimenting with on console, and this is kind of probably just a random thing I thought I'd mention, is actually changing it so that the right stick is an extra move only slot. So that will allow you to do a move skill based on the stick. So basically, you know. So you can use it to, like, if you've got like quick dodge or something.
No, that's my flask. That right clicking the thing is a flask slot. No, don't put. Oh god.
You can actually just tap the right stick and it will dodge in that direction.
That's cool.
That's like a special thing just for the console players. That
Wait, he didn't say click. He said, "Oh, interesting." So not only when I click flask, I accidentally dash somewhere. You know.
That we have there. Oh, yeah, actually, you know, another thing cool about quick dodge, by the way, it's just a little extra functionality, is that if you hold shift while you press it, it actually goes backwards from your cursor. So that's like a cool thing, because it means that you can go if you're like slamming or whatever. Sorry, I was pushing the wrong button there. If you're like slamming, you're hitting a bunch of monsters, then you can like go like that and then keep on slamming and like sort of do a tactical retreat there from
That's
the.
so
Yeah.
cool.
It's kind of a cool little feature of it.
Have you guys considered talking about the console stuff for having something like, yeah, you have a movement skill bound to like WSID, and then you can use it separately from the mouse itself, like the same way you dodge here, but instead to the side if you were to click A, for instance?
We actually experimented with this stuff. There was a few problems with it. It didn't feel good. The problem is that when you don't have an analog for that, like just the cardinal directions just wasn't quite doing it. And the other thing as well is we actually have quite limited button like bind space, which is like kind of a bit of a concern, like in terms of just buttons. So yeah, on PC it didn't really work. So yeah, we tried about and going back, the going backwards thing ended up being the most useful and also very easy to do because it's just a toggle with the shift. We might consider doing a few other things interesting with shift as well in the future, like if there's alternate modes for a few skills that happen on shift, just for things where you wouldn't ordinarily. I mean, normally like a some skills you don't really care about using shift with, and so they could unlock like an extra, like a slightly different mode for it, and it works particularly well with the dodge skill. Yeah, it's quite fun.
Having like a toggle option would be great because, for example, just like Essence Drain Contagion, being able to just toggle like Shift Contagion and stuff like that would be great for freeing up key space.
Don't we have always attack without moving? Is there in there?
No, but what I mean by for example, if right click was Essence Drain, but shift right click was Contagion.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah. So yeah, then that's kind of imagining. Although I believe we're talking about using control for it, like having another bind bar. It's one of those things that I do actually want to do. It's just that like it's surprisingly annoying because the way the binds work now is like a shitty thing that like it would weirdly require doing a database migration items in order to fix this, and it's like kind of a weird. It seems like a strange thing, but
it's because like the binds are locked in the item, right?
Yeah, it is to do with that, and it doesn't feel like it's actually one of the things that actually sucks right now is when like pull it. If you got something bound to left click and you pull it out of your weapon and then you put it back in, it like doesn't work properly, and like this little bug like that is just like
that's
one of those
really
things
annoying.
That's told me for years, and I just haven't
Summoner.
It. So there will come a time that I address all this stuff. This was the Melee patch, and so we're fixing all of this stuff. But we will get time to do.
Quick question about quick dodge. Can it go up and down ledges?
Yes. Okay,
cool.
Yep.
And is it melee restricted?
No. You can use it, but you are given it as a quest reward for the classes for the fastening. So I think it's Duelist Shadow Ranger, I think gets it. And I mean anyone can buy it, of course, from the shop. Anyone can buy it in the shop, but in terms of giving off it as those three, and then the quick sorry, that one's called Iron Skin, now Steel Skin. Sorry, there's just internal names that I still remember. The Steel Skin given to the Marauder and Templar, but then of course anyone can buy the off class ones, and there's also a third one for the casters. That get that's a low level movement skill which we haven't announced yet. But
as you said, the caster movement skill and quick dash will share a cooldown, so you can't use them together.
Yes, exactly. You can't use them. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So
considering dash has an actual cooldown, was there some sort of? Did you guys consider at all adding cooldowns to skills in general, to movement skills in general, or was that never on the table?
We didn't want to do that because it's kind of like an important part of the feel. I think that would probably irritate people a lot, way too much. I think the thing that we did where like there's like sort of built-in cooldown almost with the way that you have to re-jump when you cast it multiple times, I think is kind of a clever solution to that problem. So you kind of get the
until you get the attack speed.
If you're doing it without when you haven't done it recently. So that's the kind of thing I think that sort of fixes that without like being a thing where we need to actually have an actual cooldown on.
Just a quick question, since I hear people complain about this a lot from a development point of view in other games. When you made that change, did you have a worry that returning players would be playing and their characters would feel different and they wouldn't be able to understand why?
There was a worry about that, yes. And I think that other people were more like, I would say I'm a bit more cavalier with demanding that we fix things than some
Don't go
other developers
outside.
are. But there were certainly people. Okay, the animation canceling, especially. I'm like, we're having animation canceling, and there was so much moaning about it from people. Like, oh, I was like, especially when we first implemented it, and there was like we hadn't like fully perfected all the dead zones and everything. Then we had some people in the studio were like, this will never feel as good. Like I'm so used to this the way it works. It's like, well, like you get people who get ornery about that sort of stuff, right? But you just have to forge through it. And like, I think it's possible to always get to the point where it feels good to everyone. Like you just have to fix all the little border cases and you'll eventually get that point. The hard part is when you make a change and it isn't good yet, or like it isn't good in a few situations yet with some people's way that they play. And then those people don't see a way that it could ever feel as good to them. And so you just have to just keep on addressing it until it does. And I think that even the people now in the studio, like, there was like a thing where like some people like they play for 5 minutes after they're used to it and like I keep on canceling my skills accidentally, and then 5 minutes later they're like, oh, actually this is way better, it's like it doesn't take very long to the new way. And as I said, now that we've added like more of the dead zones and the sort of stuff that we've done to kind of address all that stuff has really improved it. Because like when we first did the animation canceling, it was just like you can just cancel any time, any skill, and like that was a problem. Like you just kept on interrupting yourself, and there was just it was bad. But yeah, working a bit more and you get to the point where it feels good now.
No, I have huge respect for that personally.
Yeah, from a racing point of view, honestly, it sounds ridiculously fun. It sounds like exactly the sort of thing you wanted to have. It's like if you're a good player, you go 15% faster, or maybe even 30, since you said it's a 15 and 15 window, right?
It depends.
At the start and at the end.
But the cancel at the start doesn't give you like all you're doing at the start is just like you can cancel into a different skill if you change your mind, kind of thing. The cancel at the end lets you move while effectively cooling down the attack animation. Okay. You sort of see what I mean. Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
When it comes to block, because you said you're reworking a lot of like the way mobs work in general. Have you looked at abilities, for instance, like proximity shield, maybe, where it wouldn't fully block damage? Percentage.
You know what? I'm actually going to raise that tomorrow. Because that's totally an interesting thing. Yeah, I'm gonna because like I actually gonna should we make proximity shield not do as much? Yeah, not be 100% damage reduction. It's probably not as terrible.
Just play melee.
Exactly. Just play melee is a good answer to that.
Yeah.
But, I will actually raise it because it's possible that there's a thing we should do about that.
No, I think it's a cool mechanic. It's just the problem when it's stacked up, on top of each other. It's like 10 mobs. It's like really frustrating.
There's exactly that situation in the trailer for Legion. So so the we are actually changing the abilities of a lot of monsters, by the way. So I told you how we're effectively revisiting all the X 1 through 3 monsters. They're getting a lot of ability changes alongside that. Like a lot of them are getting new stuff, and all the boring monsters are getting better. So that'll be a big improvement.
If the problem is proximity shield bubble stacking, if there's any way for the mobs to know what the mobs around them are doing, if you have one that has proximity shield up, you tell the other mobs not to cast it.
Yeah, that might.
I don't know if monsters can know what the other ones are doing though.
What if you knock them back?
They kind of can, but the checks could get expensive depending on how they're implemented. So you have to be a little bit careful. Like our AI system has a huge number of conditions, and some of them we kind of say like don't use this unless it's a boss because they get expensive to check if you've got a lot of monsters involved. Like a random example of that is like Duresso has this like thing where he will he can dodge projectiles. Like he actually looks at all the projectiles that are coming towards him. He will dodge sideways if there's a projectile facing in his direction that would hit him eventually. Like that's the kind of AI check we can do if it's just a single boss, but you wouldn't want to put that on like every monster because like that would be super expensive.
What the fucking Duresso?
I know that you didn't want to specifically talk about Legion, but is there anything with the new league planned around these like combat changes? Like, does it take advantage of that?
So like not really. I mean, like we wouldn't want to make a league where like people who weren't melee players they weren't like being like have a good. But I mean, Legion. I hope you. I mean, we'll put it this way: you guys are going to see the trailer tomorrow. We'll think it's a cool league. I think it's a fun one. I think it's a fun one personally. And once again, this trailer isn't this podcast isn't about that. So you'll have to wait. You'll have to wait tomorrow to see.
Yeah, Turkey's really nonchalantly throwing that in there. We didn't know the name of anything, so I'm kind of freaking out.
No, it's actually funny. Like, so Take actually found out when we were doing the video test before because I accidentally he saw the login screen, and the login screen had the countdown on it, because it's like an unreleased version. So yeah,
I was betting on necropsy. I lost my bet.
right.
What can you do?
I'm pretty sure they just do this all on purpose, just to like snitch test us, kind of like, okay.
Well, I don't know. I know Bex was enjoying her like troll session of like including one of every of the names tweets.
Yeah.
She likes to do this stuff. All right, so I guess like how long have we been going here? Like how long?
It's been going on for about just under an hour and a half.
Okay.
Before before we wrap up though, one thing just for you personally, what melee skill are you most excited or like happy with now?
Well, I have to say Cyclone. Cyclone feels great. Like Cyclone is awesome. But I mean, yeah, that is like the easy answer. Like Cyclone is just so fun. What I want to see is if single target can actually be a viable build, right? Like I want like that to be a thing, right? So that if we can get to there, we'll have succeeded. I mean, of course, all melee needs to feel good, but that's just like I really wanted to solve those things, which is like, oh, you can't do this because it sucks. Is like a problem that we had. So I want to see heavy strike build be a thing. You know what I mean?
Just give a heavy strike.
Like that should be possible.
Monsters explode in a metal chain.
Yeah.
Like the changes to stun, and you said there were support gems coming that would support a like larger individual hit, but maybe a slower one coming. Like that also seems like it leads into that. Now there's another multiplier for stun. Like I don't know, I could see crit heavy strike Starforge or something stunning bosses to death.
I mean, people are stunning Shaper right now, so you guys gotta look into that cap. I don't know.
I mean, when we were talking about the stun stuff, I mean, so Mark was telling me, yeah, you can stun anything if we're willing to invest in. It's just that it's at the expense of damage. So effectively, you'll be able to invest less in stun, getting more damage, and actually make that stuff more viable, which is the benefit you're getting. So yeah.
Gotcha.
One question.
Well, I have to ask about one of the major things. You did mention physical attacks being different from elemental a little bit, but any changes to bleed?
That's what I was going to ask.
There are bleed changes. There are, but I don't know what they are. Sorry, once again, it's not really my department. They're rebalancing that stuff. They are rebalancing. Just bleed.
Okay.
So bleed and bleed and also poison are being changed a little bit. I think there's some minor tweaks to that stuff. So,
yeah.
All right.
That was literally what I was going to ask. Okay then. So we don't keep you for too much longer. Just yes, no answer. If I start 3.7 with a Claw Viper Strike build, will I be happy?
If the answer to that is not yes, then we fucked up. So I'll make sure. I will make sure that is good. That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
Octavian, do you have any final questions for Jonathan?
No, I'm pretty happy. The spectral shield throw change is coming. It's good.
All right.
Okay.
I've been holding on to that particular one for a while.
Well, thank you very much for that. And there was a lot more cool stuff in there than I thought there would be. There were a few moments, just quickly, I don't know if you guys got it as well. It was kind of like when Neo finds out he's in the Matrix kind of moments. So you're like... But yeah, so
yeah.
When I realized the amount of time that must have gone into like reworking every enemy animation, well, maybe not literally all of them, but a vast majority of animations, so they actually align with what you're seeing in game. That is impressive in scope.
Yeah, we've got a big QA department now, and a lot of them, they get caught.
Oh, we lost.
Sorry, you cut out after QA.
Saying,
shut up, bird.
We've got a big QA department now, and so they get co-opted for these kinds of tasks. You've got like, we've got like tons, like hundreds of like monsters to like add. So I mean, because the thing is, there was also the didn't really too much, but that slow zone thing where you can slow the animation down but get the build up, that requires like markup in the animation of like what part of the animation do we hold on if we're going to hold to do the strike, as well as the markup for the actual damage areas and getting the keyframes rate on the damage timing. There's quite a lot of little metadata stuff going on there, right? So yeah, it's taking a while. I mean, I'm not going to lie, it's not all done yet, right? So we've got like 3 weeks left to finish doing all those with the rest of the monsters. I'm pretty sure we'll make it in time, but yeah. So it's one of those things where it's like it's not actually holding back. Like, you know, we can do testing without
too loud?
finishing that stuff. So it's kind of like there's a big list of that stuff still to do, but we'll get there.
It's almost over.
And also on that note, anything that you've seen today was on a test build. Any lagginess
Oh yeah,
or
there's
whatever,
a few bugs
you know,
and
stuff can
funkiness,
change.
but,
You know, it's fine.
It'll be all. I really want to get that interaction stuff just 100%.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, on that, thank you for coming on, Jonathan, and I'm really looking
No
forward
worries.
to playing Legion.
Yeah, glad to hear it.
Okay, that was interesting. That was very interesting. There's a lot of stuff they did. Like, goddamn. All of the, like, well, most of the animation, like Octavian said. Oof, that must be a lot of work. Also, they seem to rework a lot of the animations of the actual characters too, which is interesting because I believe we're getting remodels in 4.0. So I'm just wondering, did they do them so that they already like match up to the 4.0 things? Need patch notes? Yeah, we definitely need patch notes. But they definitely provided with the fundamental changes. The fact that we have animation canceling alone is absolutely insane. That alone is just... They talk about 200 changes. I mean, like, they didn't talk about specifically that, but the fact that you have animation canceling, and then they talked about slower attacks. So, like, because you can cancel your attack after you deal damage, that means that slower attacks, which most likely is gonna affect two-handers too, is gonna be better. And we're getting like we're getting support for all of the weapon types. Wonder what that's gonna be. Then there was, yeah, like other supports as well. But I really feel like they need to buff the two-handers because of the offhand slot that you lose, especially now with assuming you can put one of the incubators for each item slot, because that means if you're playing like a two-handed non-bow build, you're losing one incubator, which is gonna be big. Yeah, Cyclone Trickster seems interesting. I should say that. I kind of want to do something around that. And the fact that they added like 4 extra, whatever the thing is called, for like the targeting, might actually mean that, I mean, yeah, the pebbles issue might be less of an issue now, and then the fact that that could also make it so that skills like freeze pulls and whatnot, yeah, the movement vectors, yeah, so that shit like the freeze pulls and shit like that might not actually get basically just cancelled out because of the like a wall or something like that, which is kind of cool. Did you see in the new wall protector? I mean, they just added up like a mechanic to it, yeah, that gives you some spell damage and makes frenzy charges generate as power charges instead. It's kind of interesting. That sounds interesting for cast while channeling Cyclone Discharge, because as a trickster, you're generating both frenzy and power charges while you're channeling. Kind of cool. That also means Raider could be very, very interesting, because you get frenzy charges while hitting rare and unique enemies. So that's interesting as well. But yeah, that's there was a lot of cool stuff in this Baeclast. I haven't watched Ziggy video. I've seen that already. We checked it already. Yeah, we definitely need patch notes and more information about a lot of stuff. Here to make our we know about a lot of changes, but we don't know really how good it will feel.
Jonathan is prepared.
What is this? Oh, there's a. Oh, I guess we're gonna watch that this week. This is like a highlight of the Baeclast. Oh.
Very special. Now, none of us have seen anything that he's shown us, and this is all very early build stuff. So if anything goes wrong, then it's completely fine, and don't worry.
In POE now, obviously, you can do an attack, but if you start the attack now, you can then just cancel right out of it. If it's before the contact point, in which case, like you barely anything happens. As an animation finishes, my character can kind of move immediately as soon as the damage has been done. And that actually changes the feel of combat quite a lot. So it's like quite a significant change. As well made it so that all movement skills are now instant. So that's obviously another big one. What I'm going to do is we've actually also added a bunch of low-level movement skills because we wanted to. So I'm just going to go skill. So this skill here is called Dash, which is like the lowest level movement skill. You get it at level 4. And this skill, as soon as I press the button, I'm just instantly dashing across the place. And once again, I can be in the middle of an attack, like even if I'm in the middle of like doing a double strike or whatever, I can just quickly, like move out of the way at any time. So that movement skills now completely override like anything, even the except for stun, unless you have been stunned. Why am I on fire right now? That looks a bit weird. There's like
the cannibals got you.
A bug here, but anyway. And so this low-level movement skill here, basically, it's not designed as a sort of traveling skill, so it's got like a small cooldown on it. But you can use that to get out of combat. So this is what Leap Slam looks like now that it's instant. Oh, sorry, that was not Leap Slam. That's what Leap Slam looks like now that it's instant. But what we didn't want to do is have it so that Leap Slam, we want it to be instant when you're using it to get away, but we didn't want Leap Slam to be instant when you're just doing it again. So what we actually did is we made it so that if you Leap Slam repeatedly, you still get the old animations that you did before, and the timing is exactly like what it is. But if you Leap Slam, not having Leap Slam for a little while, sorry, I'm running out of mana. If you Leap Slam without having Leap Slam for a little while, then it is instant like that. So if I'm just holding down the mouse here, I'm not letting go at all, and I'm successfully attacking this entire pack of monsters without having to let go of the mouse, which is actually something that
Awesome.
we didn't have before. One thing I'd like that you might not have noticed is that actually every melee attack now can hit multiple enemies. So if you've got multiple guys here, I hit all of them with a single strike. So basically, whatever it looks like you should hit with your swing is what you actually hit. So now you can see.
Oh
larger.
my god!
Yeah.
Wow.
So like it's actually okay. So the other thing, of course, Cyclone now channeled. So I just let go when I want to stop. And the other thing as well is it's got different speeds. So if I move the mouse really close, I move really slowly. If I move onto it, I actually stop. And then if I move further away, I go faster. So that actually feels really nice. So now we actually like every attack has got like a damage range. Like
he said
and,
the accuracy on
one thing
items
we
is
really did was we made sure to get the timing on everything correct. So as you're swinging through guys, you can see that
it's not instant; it actually travels through.
It's not like an instant point. There's actually like a sort of period where like it actually goes through the guys. So this was like a system that we were changing over to, and the thing is that actually we're also gonna do the same thing on monsters. Like if I open Hillock here,
one thing about Cyclone I wanna talk about though is
faster.
I really hope that the bigger the AoE becomes, it doesn't like fucking clutter everything, that you can't see anything. I think it's gonna be extremely important to actually see stuff. So it feels like there's like I hope that the empty space between your character and then the edges of the Cyclone is actually so that you can see stuff around it. Because if you can't see anything inside the Cyclone, it's gonna feel so bad.
It's not instant; it actually travels through.
It's not like an instant point. There's actually like a sort of period where like it actually goes through the guys. So this was like a system that we were changing over to, and the thing is that actually we're also gonna do the same thing on monsters. Like if I open Hillock here, Let me just find Hillock. So his like pullback for the punch is like way slower, but the part is the same is the same duration as before. Let me just do some damage to him to get his pull sort out. It's easier to see with that. Okay, what's going on here? Why has he got? Why am I not doing any damage to this guy?
You spawned Uber Hillock. It's 1% chance.
Oh no.
Oh,
You're
you're
too high
right. I
level.
actually did.
Actually, only got
Yeah, you
Roshi.
can see the sword in him.
Oh my god.
I was like, what the hell's going on here?
I'm sorry, Jonathan.
Yeah,
You
no, you're
really
actually
need
right.
to
It's
commit
got
to the fight. You have
Yeah,
to commit
it's
to
actually
the
got
fight.
the sword in there. I'm just gonna do that again.
No.
There are people farming
What?
like 12 hours to get that.
Kill this thing. Come on, get it.
No, okay. I actually no, come on. It's gonna take me forever. I'm just gonna use it. There we go.
There you go.
Yeah. Okay, right. So anyway, so his actual attack speed has been slowed down a lot, but he's got what we call slow zones in his attack animation, where basically so like notice his attack animation, he kind of has this wind up that takes longer, and then the actual slash is preserved in speed. I've never actually done this with Uber Hillock, and I worry that the animation set is different, and I'm concerned that this is like ruining my demo. Right, just gonna use the cheat to get rid of him. But anyway,
Whoa.
so basically the idea here though.
Yeah, he's pretty high
like
level
we can
now.
kind of get this anticipation and build up in the different attacks, and actually have that, and so you can actually dodge them, or you can use things like the the steel skin and stuff like that in order to actually respond to those events happening. And so that's something we really want to do. And so we actually revisited a huge number of the monsters. So like one of the things we noticed was like Hillock, his contact point and his animation before, like when he was using the old system, like single target, he just hits a guy. His contact point was in the wrong part of the animation. So it's like he takes a swing and like the damage was being applied like before the actual sword like hit you. And it's like no wonder people say that melee combat in PoE feels clunky. Truly, the first boss of the game is like got damage timing. And it's like all it takes is like someone to look at that and like and actually focus on that stuff again, and it really improves that stuff. So yeah, like I think that just getting all those little things right is just the feel of the game.
There's so many cuts from his mic. It feels bad, man. But yeah, that was. Let's just take a look at the credit rate of this. Yeah. Do you think AoE skills will dominate since you need to hit Legion mobs to activate them? Yeah, that's one thing I'm gonna touch on the TLDR video thing that I'm gonna do later. Probably, I'm not sure if it's gonna be today or tomorrow. I mean, we could start gathering stuff on Notepad because there's a lot of things. But one that I mentioned during watching the trailer is I wonder how it's gonna feel, and it's also gonna dictate the maps that you're gonna run most likely because open area has chance for more monsters, right? Because they are already dense. The density of them is already so high. Yeah. Super secret podcast hype. Yeah, I'm really happy they got to do this. So I think it would also been kind of cool to have Jonathan on a live podcast like this weekend or something like that, but this is kind of cool. I really like this as well. And then they obviously have the option that if something goes wrong, they'll just edit it out or something like that. But yeah, that's yeah. Now the question is like I'm really hype about all the mechanics changes and how good it's gonna make the early game and especially the racing feel. But I am not sure about the end game of the melee stuff because you need to have a good AoE end game to not get overshadowed by the things that have good AoE. So yeah. I'm pretty sure Cyclone will be fine. Yeah, the animation cancel is insane. Oh, good night, Chider. Hope everything's great. Yeah, this was a nice Baeclast. Oh yeah, one thing about the flat damage on the skills. I'm not sure how I feel about that, honestly. Because let's say that you want to play like Elemental Reave for whatever fucking reason. If you want to do that, but the Reave itself gets flat physical damage, no leveling. This could potentially mean that it gets enough damage for like something like Fuse Reflect to become an issue, and so on. But it's really nice for leveling. I guess there could also be like, there could be supports that are just like, you know, think about like Fuse to Lightning, but instead it where you convert all or something like that, or you can't take, or you can't deal physical damage and it gives you a massive elemental damage buff or something like that. Since we already have that for other way around, so yeah. I am concerned but excited, I guess it's the consensus of this all.